Hello, everybody, and welcome back to 100 Acres of Ink. This is a Lorcana podcast. I'm Tegan. I'm joined by Chris. We took a week off because holidays, and I was traveling, and it's just too hard. I want to have my camera set up and my mic set up and all those things. But we're back. I hope you had a happy holiday. Did you do anything special, Chris?
No, I mostly stayed home, tried to take a couple days off, and just relaxed, enjoy the holiday.
Nice.
How about you? Said you went traveling?
Yeah, I was up at my folks' house just for the weekend. They live a couple hours away, so it's always nice to get up and see them. Even got a couple of Lorcana games in with my wife, so that was nice. It's one of the things I love about Lorcana. Like, I can just throw a couple of decks in my backpack and have something to play. So that was fun. What have you been up to in the world of Lorcana over the past 2 weeks?
Mostly still intense amounts of grinding, trying to figure out what I want to play for the LCQs.
You and me
I'm
both.
Yeah, right. Think I'm given kind of the aggro state of the meta. I think the plan is to play something like stun like. Um, I can't really say more than that, but a friend of mine, or I guess our friend Rich at Locals yesterday brought up an interesting point, which is that there's a lot of really aggressive decks and like a stun deck, which is a type of deck that usually ends up appearing in something like Yu-Gi-Oh, where you play a lot of kind of anti-meta or cards like that meant to stun your opponent's strategies might be really good.
Hmm,
So I've been kind of brewing really hard with that, but we'll see what happens. Right. It's probably going to be green steel something because that seems like a really great combination for that. Uh,
sure.
Spoiler alert: Heffalumps and Woozles is a really good card.
Yeah, I know you've been playing that card pretty much since it came out, and I've been impressed with it in some of our play in our games.
Yeah. How about you? I know last we talked, I think you were working on Sapphire Steel, kind of hero aggro.
Yeah, I've still been kind of brewing that. I don't know. I'm not sold on it because Blue Steel does not have a one drop that quests for two.
Mm-hmm.
It makes it a little hard. I feel like the deck would be a lot better if we just had a one drop that quested for two. Something akin to Merfolk or even Lilo or Maleficent, something, in that vein, a Daisy, I don't
Sure.
know. Um, but we don't have that. We're not lucky enough to have a card like that. So, um, we have a lot of really good two drops. There's
Mm-hmm.
like Calhoun and Smee, and then there's just a swath of good two drops that quest for two. There's like Mr. Arrow, and there's Duke of Weaselton, and there's Anna, and there's there's so many two drops that you could play in this deck. Um, I don't know. I've tried about 100 different builds. I actually did a coaching session, so my first coaching session with somebody else that's playing this kind of deck. It was somewhat helpful, I think. We talked through some deck choices. I think after kind of talking it out with him and playing it out and talking through some lines with him, it kind of convinced me not to play Haram. Like, I've been playing kind of a Haram popsicle just to have some sort of draw in addition to Doc.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm not feeling as good about that. I think it's just a little bit too slow.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and with how fast the meta is, and even with the control decks, like red blue can just ramp so fast, and
Yeah.
it's hard to get under them. Again, not having a one drop the quest for two. um
Dear Ravensburger, can we please get some kind of inkwell destruction in the next set? Look, I'm just saying, it'd be
that'd be
super helpful.
interesting. Yeah. um but yeah, so I don't know, I've been kind of brewing that. I think I've decided I'm definitely not playing Haram,
Mm-hmm.
but I'm starting to test some other stuff. So I feel like I'm in a little bit of a crisis with regards to LCQ. And I don't know, we'll talk about that a little bit more when we get to the main topic. Um, I'm kind of focused on playing purple decks right now. I'm putting a good number of reps into green purple.
Mhm.
For my mind, that's still one of the best decks in the format, if not
Mhm.
the best deck, and it just feels really good to play. So um, I played a lot of that deck in set three, so I'm pretty comfortable kind of going back to it. The play lines are not all that different, and of course, it just plays a lot of purple cards that
Yeah.
are being played in RP, which I have a lot of reps into. I think realistically, I'm kind of between RP and Emerald Amethyst. Um, I don't know which one I'm going to decide. I was actually playing around with a kind of spicy RP that I saw.
Mhm.
Um, Somebody playing in a YouTube video playing Moana and the shift Moana. You
Mhm.
don't have a captain for the Moana to be able to challenge early on, but she still can quest pretty much every turn. She has good flinergy or good flinergy.
Hey.
Hey, she has good synergy with Flynn, is what I meant to say. But if you miss the Sisu, which you sometimes do, going Moana on one, Flynn on two feels really good on the play.
Mhm.
Um, if nothing else, she just quests for two or quests for one and trades into pretty much anything that takes her out. So
Mhm.
that feels pretty good. So I've kind of been putting both my reps into one of those two decks right now. Um, I don't know. We'll see what the next couple of weeks have in store. I'm not playing in anything major this weekend, but I am playing in like 100-person tournament up in Sacramento the weekend before Continental. So I'll
Yeah.
get a good test in that weekend, and we'll see what happens. I don't know if there's any other kind of major tournaments in between now and then in terms of sample size or what will have an effect on the meta. I know people are probably going to be a little bit uh, unwilling to have their decks published over the next couple weeks too. So there's that. It's kind of an interesting moment. I think not having the big competitive background
Mhm.
and having a super solid internal testing group. Um, I don't know. I feel a little bit at a loss. With regards to LCQ, but
Sure.
we'll see what happens.
Yeah.
Let's talk through some headlines across the game. Couple things going on. One that I'm contemplating if I want to place an order is Japanese boosters are in pre-sale in some places online. They're going to be released the end of January, so like 125
Mhm.
is the date that I've kind of seen. So post LCQ, um, they're going to be smaller boxes and
Oh.
smaller packs. So that's something to kind of know. Like you can pre-order a box here for just under $60. So from what I understand, it's only like uh, maybe 16 packs in a box, and
Mhm.
then the packs are only 6 cards each. Um,
Whoa.
so I don't know what that means in terms of the rarity distribution of the cards. Of like,
Mhm.
I assume you're only going to get like one rare and then the foil. Um, I don't know if that
Yeah.
changes the enchanted hit rate. In terms of how many packs for that, but like I
Yeah.
don't know.
No, that's yeah. Because right, you would assume it would make the hit rate go down because you're seeing less cards, but also there's, I guess, more chances for foil rares and such. You would expect, given that it is a six
Yeah.
card pack. Be fascinating to see what that does to the market and kind of what that does to the availability of first chapter cards. It's going to be fun.
Yeah, I mean, as far as I know, the like French cards and German cards that we've seen, the booster boxes are the same size as
Hmm.
the US boxes. So
Hmm.
I think this is the first time that we're seeing kind of the box vary. And I think this is more in line from what you see from like Pokemon cards in Japanese. They're smaller packs as well, they're smaller boxes as well. So I think this is more in line with what you see in terms of Pokemon. But I don't know. It's going to be interesting. Uh, Any other thoughts on uh, that?
Honestly, yeah, no. The one and only thing I can think of right now is right. Um, I know a lot of other games have like a language restriction on what's legal to play and what's not. I think, as far as we're aware, that there's Lorcana doesn't have that restriction yet, right?
As far as I'm aware, it's legal to play any official Lorcana card. You
Cool.
can't play proxies or stuff like that, obviously.
Yeah.
But as long as it's a official Lorcana card, you can play it in a deck. Um, I've seen people. Where was I? I think it was in Seattle. I played against somebody who was playing Sapphire Steel, and they were running the French Big Ben, which is Cogsworth, um, which is pretty funny. I kind of want to get myself a foil playset of those.
Yeah, that looks
Um,
fun.
I think that would be kind of fun. I know somebody here local to us, Q
Hmm.
from Non Inkables, was talking about getting some French cards, and the Chip and Dale from this set is called Tick and Tack. Which is also really funny. So, yeah, I mean, it seems to me that it's fairly legal to play these cards, or not fairly, but it is legal to play these cards from
Hmm.
other languages as long as they're official Arcana cards.
Cool.
Um, we didn't talk about it last week, but the CCS 10K happened.
Hmm.
DeCandio won again with Diggy Diggy Hole, this kind of mine style of Amber Steel. Um, I think that's what the third straight time he's won the Charlie's Collectible Show
I
event.
think so. Yeah, that sounds right. The DeCandio's pretty good at the game, especially when it comes to that particular tournament. He's got a pretty solid win streak there.
Yeah, he seems to kind of paint the meta dead on,
Hmm.
and anticipate the meta, and seems like he is pretty good at kind of changing these song decks to fit that meta game pretty perfectly.
Hmm.
Um, it's pretty impressive. I was talking with somebody on Twitter, kind of joking that uh, maybe we should call it the DeCandio Classic at this point. Uh, it seems like there's not really, anything meta wise coming out of it other than four Amber Steel decks made the top. I think one of them was DeCandio's list. Obviously, there was a Steel Fossa. There was a more traditional Amber Steel list. Were the other two, I think. Um, there's an RP list, a Ruby Sapphire list, and I think like a Purple Steel list. I can't remember what the last list was, but um, I don't know, nothing too shocking. It does kind of seem like Amber Steel is everywhere right now. Any thoughts on what we saw out of Charlie's?
um, Honestly, I'm very surprised that this list, given what is kind of the surprising amount of people playing like blue red control, I'm pretty surprised that this deck came out and kind of crushed the whole thing. It's a very strong aggressive list, and that makes real sense because aggressive lists tend to get really well under blue red. Right, the faster you can go, the harder it is for them to set up into things. I'm honestly, I really like the inclusion of kind of what has become the dwarves mine or dwarves core here.
Hmm.
Um, Especially the like, as you see here, we're playing four docks now, which is just a really good sort of draw engine alongside the Rapunzel. Right, it's cheap. You can kind of aggro your hand out and then dump a dock for extra cards. Yeah, honestly, I really like this list. There's definitely now people kind of innovating on that core, trying it in different colors and seeing what's happening. I kind of really like that somebody saw a bunch of these things and went, "Oh, hey, here's synergy we can kind of take as an engine and sort of start messing around with." I think it's really cool.
Yeah, I mean this dwarf core was kind of part of the core of like that location deck too. I don't think it was running the happy as well, but that location deck that came out of Seattle. Um, uh, but I mean, Purple Steel has played around with it.
Mhm.
Um, I know Emerald Steel Zan was experimenting with it, prior to EU. I know I've played around with it, and John has played around with it in this kind of Sapphire Steel, more aggressive list. So yeah, it seems like a pretty good package. Um, I don't know if happy is always the best card in the deck, but it is an evasive answer for 1 ink to a
Mhm.
potential Diablo. So um, yeah, it's definitely interesting. The last headline I've got here is the Lorcana Players Poll uh, came out again,
Mhm.
and I think no surprise, after CCS, it was, I think the poll took place on Sunday or
Mhm.
Monday right after CCS. So Amber Steel jumping to the top, RP still holding in second place, uh, Ruby Sapphire in third, and Emerald Amethyst dropping to fourth place, and then kind of on down from there.
Mhm.
I think the other flip here is Emerald Steel dropping one position to sixth, and Purple Steel going up one position to fifth.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense to me. Obviously, Amber Steel had a breakout performance at CCS. It, crushed a bunch of the top spots. Ruby Amethyst has kind of always been the sort of rival color, rival deck to that. We've seen it since Chapter 1, so it makes perfect sense that it's holding on that second place spot. Um, blue red is blue red. It's a control deck. It's kind of that classically strong, hold you off until I can get to my bigger threats and start answering things. And I definitely understand the sort of flip with green steel and purple steel. As much as I am a longtime green steel player, purple steel definitely got a really great tool in Genie. It's effective. It's hard to answer, and it replaces itself with a card in hand, which is great. And on top of that, you can play Calhoun's in that deck, which create a really great answer in the early game, especially if you're going to do something like one of your cantripping one drops on one, Broom, Little Diablo, Turnabox followers. It's a great follow up to just be like, cool, and then Calhoun. So then I'm gonna quest with this. If you want to trade and give me a card, fine, I can answer with Calhoun. So I can definitely see why that switch got made. Um, I'm I guess not as surprised now that I think about it that green purple dropped. Um, I would have expected it to be in third place, just above Ruby Sapphire, just because it is another really aggressive, like fast start deck that's really good at like, cool, I'm gonna push a bunch of lore in the early game before you get a chance to come out and fight. But maybe people are having different experiences, so I guess that makes sense.
I think the hard thing is its biggest weakness is kind of a song deck
Yeah.
that can just remove a bunch of things at once. And um, it wins games when it can hit the board early and like
Hmm.
quest for a bunch and then, kind of do goat shenanigans and evasive genie and Elsa things. Um, and if it can't do that because its stuff is just getting removed,
Hmm.
uh, because of Steel Song or because of early, Cinderella removal in a more of a mines package, um, I think that deck is going to struggle a little bit. But I don't know. You kind of have these cyclical metagames in Lorcana. It really feels like, and um, I think the metagame in Lorcana, and we'll maybe talk about this a little bit more, but like it seems to shift really fast. The metagame is the metagame for that event, and then kind of afterwards things will shift, right?
Hmm.
People will see uh, Steel Song kind of win, and then a bunch of people will shift over to Steel Song, and then there will be people that will shift over, and Blue Red will rise to meet it, right? As it often does. So, um, yeah, I don't know. Not too much, I think, to learn from this, other than this poll seems to now be pretty reactive to recent kind of major tournament results. The first one
Hmm.
was right after um, the EU Championship, and you had RP and Emerald Amethyst in the top two spots, and now we had another big tournament, and it kind of shifted. So it'll be interesting to see kind of as the format continues to evolve, and of course we've got North American championships coming up here very very soon, so we'll get a lot more data then, and by then the format will settle, I think, a little bit towards set championships. So
Hmm.
let's move into our judge segment. as always, we've got our judge segment, where we're going to talk about an interesting interaction that may not quite operate how you think. This one's, I don't know, I was going to say more simple than the last couple that we've looked at, in that there are less cards involved. um, but you and I were talking about it here before we started recording, and I don't know. I'm confused with how this one works. And so, why don't you explain it to me? We're talking about Ursula, Deceiver of All, and Boss on a Roll. So, Ursula's ability allows you to double sing a song, sing it once, and then play that song again from your discard for free, and then put it on the bottom of your deck. Bosses on a Roll is a card that allows you to put stuff on the bottom of your deck. So there's kind of a weird interaction there. Walk me through it.
Sure. So, at taken at face here, uh, and as somebody who plays Ursula Deceiver of All, this is definitely a mistake that I would have made if I hadn't spent a bunch of time looking at this particular interaction. Um, Normally, you would expect, okay, you play bosses on a roll, you resolve bosses on a roll, then you do Ursula's ability where you get to play it again, and then you play it again, and then you put it on the bottom. Turns out that's not actually how this works. The way that this is supposed to work is you will play the first bosses on a roll. You will resolve either, putting however many cards on top, however many cards on bottom you would like. You'll gain your lore. Uh, it will go to the discard. And then once, because you've now played the card,
Hmm.
then once it's in the discard, Ursula's ability will see, okay, you've now played a card. So from the discard, you will now play it again. And then as you play it, you put it on the bottom of your deck. Then you will activate the second part of bosses on a roll. And it's not super intuitive because normally you'd think, okay, I have to resolve bosses on a roll first, and then I put it on the bottom of my deck. Here, it's because the effect of Ursula is what is allowing you to play it again. So you actually have to finish resolving. Got it. I'm going to declare that I'm going to play this from my discard, and I'm going to put it on the bottom of my deck. And now I'm going to resolve the effect of the second bosses on a roll. It's one of those things that is, especially if you've played DOA, Deceiver of All, a lot, you're super used to shortcutting the way that a song works. It's I do this all the time with Storm Rage on and Greensteel, right? You'll go, sing Storm Rage on with Ursula, pick my two targets. Those two will go away. This will go on the bottom of my deck. I'll draw my cards. The way that you're supposed to do this is you're supposed to resolve one Storm Rage on first, pick your target, ding something for two, draw your card, put it in the discard because now you've played it. And now, because of the way that playing a card works in Lorcana, you will play your Storm Rage on from the discard and resolve the second part of the effect, which is put it on the bottom of the deck, and then the rest of the effect of that card will resolve. It's not super intuitive and it's very sketchy. And it has to do very specifically with when you can play a card, which is not a thing that everybody thinks about. It's usually just, oh, got it, pay my ink, play my card, do the thing. So the way that this is supposed to work, again, you would play first bosses on a roll. Ursula's effect would then activate after your other bosses after the first bosses in a roll finishes resolving and is in the discard. Deceiver of All ability, you will choose to, I declare I'm going to play bosses on a roll from the discard. And then as part of that effect that allows you to do that, you're going to put it on the bottom of the deck, and then you will resolve the second bosses on a roll.
Wild.
Yeah,
I don't
yeah,
know if I agree with this one because of the way that it's worded, right?
yeah.
It says, then put it on the bottom of your deck, right? Like you can't then do something until the thing is
Yeah,
done before it.
it's a weird thing between like declaring you're going to play the card and then resolving the effect of the card. It's weird.
Yeah, it's super strange. Because like when you think about it, in other situations, right, the song has to resolve before the effects of that song, um, like or triggers that are triggered,
Mm-hmm.
by seeing that song, can resolve.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, this one is a super weird one, and I know. I'm guilty of kind of shortcutting it and just putting it on the bottom of my deck, but um, I know that the sequencing of the bag is super important with how Zan resolved stuff, for example, in that championship match in Vegas.
Mm-hmm.
Um, especially when you have like muses on board and you're bouncing and discarding and doing all kinds of stuff there. So uh, I don't know. This is a weird one. It's definitely a weird one. I mean, ultimately, I don't think it really matters in the grand
Right.
scheme of a game.
For
Like,
this one, probably not, but you never know. Maybe there's a song in the future where you have to be like, well, hang on, this is in the discard, so this other thing will check that it's in the discard first, and then you play it, and then you know, it's
yeah,
always never hurts to know these things because the game's going to evolve.
yeah, and it's just going to get more and more complicated, which is why we have this segment to talk about these really complicated interactions that are going to keep happening as we get more and more cards.
Yeah,
Um, Pretty wild. All right, let's jump into our main segment. Um, uh, our main segment tonight is how do we prep for a large tournament? I know you and I are both in kind of the throes of prep uh, for a big tournament right now. We both got LCQ coming up um, in January. What are the steps for you in terms of how you might undertake preparing for a big tournament like this? Where do you start?
sure. So my first thing that I would do is actually take a look at a lot of tournament results. Um, if I can, take a long couple of days to like look at a bunch of tournament results, try to see sort of what the meta's trending like. It's a lot of like data crunching because it's a lot of like, great. So we've seen a large majority of players be successful with this color or this deck and this kind of thing. And then it's prepping for, right, how do we beat that? And then it starts with, so right now I'm stuck on Greensteel. It's a thing. Um, so it's great. How do I tune the deck that I'm currently playing so it does well into this matchup? And so that's great. What is this particular strategy really like? What is the strategy that's been winning a lot really good at? Where is does it have weaknesses? Does it have angles that I can exploit? And how would I do that in the colors that I'm currently in? And that's right. Taking amber steel songs, just straight regular steel song as an example. They're really relying on singers. They're really relying on songs. The easiest way to attack it from that angle would be playing Ursula Deceiver, which allows me to look at my opponent's hand, discard songs from it. It's playing, good removal like Storm Rage On, Strength of Raging Fire, things like that to kind of hit the singers, because that's one of the ways that that deck does really well is it gains a lot of advantage by singing its songs and not having to pay full ink cost for them, and then using the remaining ink to then either aggro out by playing a bunch of smaller bodies or by playing big costed threats that they can now deploy without having to worry about, great, I have to deal with a board. So that's how I would attack that deck, and that's kind of how I'm approaching getting ready for LCQs, which is like, cool, here's the kind of trending decks in the meta, here's how I would try to figure out how to fight them using the colors that I'm currently in. um, and part of this is also because this is a deck that I have a large amount of reps into. And that in itself might hinder me. I'm not going to say that, oh, got it. Green Steel is clearly the best deck to go into this. I'm not Dan Syed by any means. uh, but right, I'm taking a deck that I am overly familiar with and understand kind of the general strategy of how it operates, and sort of applying it to how to fight what are current meta trends. Right. Here's a great example. Thank you for bringing this up on screen. You can kind of see a general idea of this was the meta game at the European Championship. So based on these trends, right, you can expect a decent amount of ruby sapphire. You can expect a decent amount of ruby amethyst, of amethyst, emerald, sapphire, steel, right? So let's pick one of these, I guess. Ruby amethyst. So if I were going to prep for playing a bunch of ruby amethyst decks, I would be playing much heavier discard, because I know that one of the ways that ruby amethyst will gain a lot of advantage and kind of cement its hold on the game is drawing cards, right? You're in a Ruby Amethyst deck, they're usually playing Friends on the Other Side. For a long time, they were playing Castle, they were playing Turnabox Followers. Now they're playing, Little Diablo, Magic Broom, Genie, right? They're playing a bunch of cantripping cards, a bunch of cards that allow them to not only gain card advantage, but also kind of work through card filtering right? Play a one drop, get rid of it, draw a different card. Maybe it's an answer, it's removal, it's something like that. So they can kind of solidify their hold on the game and then sort of win in the sort of the mid to late game. So the easiest way to fight that is obviously disrupt them in some way, usually keep them off card draw, something like that. But that's kind of the general idea of how I would approach prepping for a big tournament like that. And I can be wrong because some of that is based on meta predictions, right? I wouldn't have seen DeCandio's Diggy Diggy Hole list coming out. I probably would have gotten beat up because I wasn't expecting a super aggressive, like aggro Amber Steel songs deck that doesn't actually play that many songs in it, right? I would have been playing Ursula Deceivers and whiffing like time and time and time. So uh, there's merits and there's pitfalls to that kind of thing.
Yeah, I mean, so kind of what you're talking about here is like the first step is meta prediction,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
And like, what do we think is going to be in the room?
Mm-hmm.
Like, what kinds of decks do we think are going to be in the room? Um, for a tournament like nationals, in some ways it's like easier, in that we know who some of the players are going to be, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's only going to be 100 people in the room. Now, granted, you and I are not just straight qualified for continentals. Um, so we have to prep for LCQ, which is going to be 1,000 people, and we're going to play against 36 people of that 1,000. So
Mm-hmm.
like the entire metagame of LCQ may not even matter, because what really matters is the metagame of our 36 decks,
Mm-hmm.
um, which is, where things kind of get even more wild, and part of why I think prepping for LCQ is pretty overwhelming. Um, I think we also saw that like the LCQ metagame was pretty different than the metagame that we saw on Saturday in the main event at nationals.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I know Zan talked about it in his podcast, but like, he was walking around and saw so much Amber Steel songs, right?
Mm-hmm.
In LCQ. And so when he got ready for the PM one, he was like, great, I'm going to play blue red. And then, in the main event, like there was 36 or 34% blue red and only 13% Amber Steel. So he's going to be in blue red, mirrors all day if he played that in the main event. Um, whereas if you play Amethyst Emerald and come into that room for the main event, you're going to do a lot better because the deck that you brought beats the most common deck
Mm-hmm.
in the room. So, like, trying to predict a metagame, the point of doing that is to try to figure out what is the majority of what I'm going to see. And then, on one hand, like you're talking about making choices to a deck that you've already chosen to do. But I think for other people, players like Zan potentially, uh, and myself, trying to decide what deck you want to play,
Mm-hmm.
right? Um, the kind of deck selection piece, right? So if we take the LP player poll, for example, that just came out, and if we're trying to figure out, okay, what is the the deck that's going to be the most played deck in the room? Well, if we take what we saw at CCS as like the blueprint for that, it's probably
Mm-hmm.
going to be Amber Steel of
Mm-hmm.
some variety. All right. Well, if that's tier one, like what is the deck that beats Amber Steel? Well, historically, it's blue red. So this is a concept that I've kind of learned and talked about recently, but like that means that uh, red blue is kind of the tier two meta of the people that are trying to beat the best deck, right?
Mm-hmm.
A lot of times you're either playing the best deck or you're trying to beat the best deck. um, I don't like just playing the best deck and just like net decking, whatever won the most recent tournament. I want to like play something that's a little bit more creative and is trying to beat that best deck. That fulfills me as a player, more so than just going and winning. Like I want to be coming and trying to beat what is the most played deck in the room. Um, in Vegas, I played blue red. I anticipated an Amber Steel meta going into Las Vegas, and I played blue red, and I played uh, against Amber Steel 5 times that day. Um, one of them was a Mufasa list, but the other 4 times it was Steel Song, and I 2-0'd it 3 times. I 1-1'd it once, right? And I
Mhm.
was able to do that because I brought the deck that was gonna beat the deck that I was most likely gonna run into the most times during 9 rounds.
Mhm.
Um, I think where I'm kind of stuck with this cycle with, LCQ is like, okay, so if there's the tier 1 deck and then there's the tier 2 deck, like, are people gonna play the deck that beats the tier 2 deck? Um, and that's how we just get this circular metagame, right? Because what beats blue-red control? Well, uh, historically, Emerald Amethyst,
Yep.
uh, Ruby Amethyst, Emerald Steel has a decent matchup into it, and when people are playing, uh, Emerald Amethyst and, Ruby Amethyst, well, Emerald Steel players start to salivate and start to, like, think about discarding them, right?
Yeah.
And so, like, I don't know. I don't know what to play when it comes time for LCQ. I'm a little, lost in this cycle. Like, I can play blue-red. I've played a lot of blue-red, but should I be playing blue-red? I feel like blue-red just hard loses to Emerald Amethyst, and I feel like it hard loses to RP most of the time, although the matchup's a little bit better if they're not playing Castle, I think, but, uh and I don't know, Diggy Diggy Hole obviously beats it, so if there's that variant of Amber Steel, is blue-red the right take? I don't know. Blue-red can do some super powerful things, but it also is just, like, too slow in some of those things. So then you have to ask yourself, like, are there ways I can change blue-red to be faster and to deal with earlier aggression,
Mhm.
but still do the things I wanna do as blue-red? Um, I don't know, right? That's why blue-red players will play the queen, um, or other, kind of earlier, cards. Um so this is like the meta prediction. I think like once you get past that, there's the deck selection piece, and I think for a lot of people, it just comes down to like money or resources or like time, right? Of like
Yeah.
I know this deck. Uh, I don't have the time to learn another deck. I don't have that time resource to go and like learn all these new play patterns and learn the matchups from this other angle. Um, and so it might just be a comfort pick. Like it might just be familiarity is like what makes you pick a certain deck. And I know that's part of it for you with Emerald Steel, is like you're just comfortable with those cards. Like
Yeah.
you've
Yeah.
played that deck a lot. Um, and then I think, there's the meta positioning piece that we've kind of been talking about. Um, so once you've like settled on a deck, um, you and I were talking about like we've been grinding a lot. Like what does that mean? And like how do you try to grind effectively? How do you try to test effectively?
Sure. So some of it is just playing games. Some of it is like, got it. These are, this is how I play with this hand. This is how I play with that hand. Some of this is, like matchup specific testing. If you can, and this unfortunately comes down to play groups, right? If you can find people in your area that hey, you usually play this deck. Can I get a couple of games against you? Or, hey, I know you were playing this deck at one point. Can I get some games against you? In terms of like matchup testing, some of it is like there's there's a a style of playtesting that I think I mentioned on Podcana once, or maybe on a Labyrinth stream, which is where they'll play with open hands
Mm,
as a sort of like, hey, let's kind of test out. Here's my opening hand, and like here's my play, my turn one play, my turn two play. You know, here's like playing through the lines, but doing it in an open way, so it's easier to see. Like, got it. So here's what's going to happen if I play this. Here's what's going to happen if I play that. Right, because that's part of how you learn new lines in a deck. especially if we get to, specific card choices or tech choices, right? If you have old lines that now get changed because you've changed cards out or you've changed ratios for things, you're gonna want to know, right? At least a general idea of how that line works, instead of like kind of going in and playing it blind. It's going to be a lot easier to be like, hang on, no, I've tested this line. This is kind of what happens here. Obviously, it's not going to go exactly the way it happened in testing. That will almost never happen. But this way, at least you can kind of be like, got it. This is generally what happens. I'm kind of prepared if something goes wrong, but like this is kind of the expected outcome of this particular play line. And it's a hard thing to do. You have to have, again, this is a resource thing. You have to have time to do it, right? Because the more time you have to play your lines or practice your lines or kind of even sit and, I don't know if you've done this. I know I have, where sometimes I'll like take my deck to work with me and I'll just sit and I'll just mulligan cards. Like I'll just draw a hand. I don't like this. Put these back. Mulligan a hand. Okay, I could probably play this. Right. Sometimes it's even just that of just like practice your mulligans and be like, hey, I can play from this hand, or hey, I can't really play from this hand, and trying to play that out, right? And that also lets you see where your tech choices end up, or like what your specific card ratios end up like, because you can be like, okay, got it. I've mulliganed, X number of hands, and in X number of hands, I've seen this card this many times. I've seen that card this many times, and it's useful for that, right? It's useful for that kind of thing. Um, but also, I gotta point this out. I am a huge fan of number 4 and 5 on here because uh, folks, just as a general PSA, self care, very important. Please do not burn yourself out testing for an event or testing for a tournament. Yes, they're very important. Yes, it'd be very fun to win. If you show up half dead, you are not going to play as well as you would like to. Personal experience here. If you're like hacking up a lung and you haven't slept well and you try to go to a 9 hour long tournament, you're not going to have a good time.
Yeah. I mean, I'm reminded of my friend Ben. Like Ben showed up to Seattle after just getting home from Hong Kong, like the day before. Um, and like, he had done some testing leading up to it and had a decent idea of the meta he had played in Las Vegas too.
Mhm,
So, kind of knew what to expect, but like he went in, uh, just like jet lagged massively, um, and didn't play as well as he wanted to. I think I put in here like don't pull an all nighter because I'll be that person like tweaking things the night before or like just testing stuff, testing stuff. Um, and it's a reminder to myself that like sometimes that's not actually helpful. What would be helpful is like getting a good night's sleep and
mhm.
like maybe wake up a little bit early and like just practice some mulligans. Don't like wake up and jam 5 games before round one, but like wake up and like run through some mulligans, like run through some ideal lines, like kind of remind yourself some of that. Um, Getting back to some of the earlier stuff on this list, like testing, I think uh, I've heard some people talk about on other podcasts, things like a gauntlet or like a testing gauntlet.
Mhm,
And I think that's really what I'm referring to when I'm talking about matchup testing is like if you're going to bring a certain deck, well, if Amber Steel Songs and RP and Blue Red Control are the three most played decks, and that's going to be 60% of the field, well, you need to be able to beat two of the three,
mhm.
right? And so, like, can you make sure that you beat two of the three, and then can you get to a place where like you're not just folding O2 in the other ones, and you're able to like get one game on the play, um, and still be able to like be okay, right? Because if you can't do that, you shouldn't be bringing that deck to a 9 round tournament, that is
Yeah,
super big if you're wanting to be competitive, right?
right.
um I think testing those matchups brings me to the point that you were kind of then talking about like specific tech cards or specific choices for certain matchups. Often with a deck you're going to have like a core of the deck that's like 50 cards.
Mhm,
And then you've got 10 cards that are like, well, I don't know about these 10 cards, or like these 10 cards could be these 20 cards. And so now I need to like figure out which of those 20 cards I'm going to play on this given day. And that's where you do things like when you're playing blue red, you're like, okay, I'm going to put 2 Queen of Hearts in there so that I have an answer to Bonsai on turn 2, right?
Mhm.
So that I have some way of dealing with Bonsai. Um, when I played in Las Vegas, it was like, okay, I'm going to play 2 Scar because uh, there's, you know, Castle and there's uh, all of these kind of early aggression Steel Song decks, and I want to be able to do a one-sided board wipe uh, and play Scar on 7 and not just rely on B prep. Pete's in the meta. They're just like playing massively the board, then they're playing Pete, and I can't do anything, right? So I want to have more ways of dealing with their board than just B prep. I want Big Sisu, and um uh I want Scar, and so I had, some ratio of non B prep board wipes to play around Pete.
Yeah.
Um, so those are some of the things that you're kind of thinking about when you're trying to like tie up your plan or tie up your deck, and sort out those last couple of things. Um, yeah, I think we've covered, a good amount of it here, or at least how I'm trying to prep for this. I would say I felt like I was in this like specific card choices, tech cards piece,
Mhm.
uh, until I decided I don't know if I'm going to play that deck. And so now I have to start this process all over again. Right. I have to like go back and start from scratch. And it's like, okay, if I want to play green purple, but not lose to Steel Song as often, like how do I do that, right? And so that those are the questions I'm asking myself now, trying to play a purple deck. Can I play a purple deck and not just lose to Diablo? Can I play one of these decks and not just get my hand discarded and lose?
Mhm.
Um, and so, that's where now I'm going back to just general testing, and then I'll start doing more matchup specific testing and trying those things over and over again. Um, but I think those like testing individual lines is also super important. When I was playing blue red, for example, you would play popsicle on 1, and then you would ramp on 2, and then you would play haram, right?
Mhm.
And I would just be finding that in the mirror match or against RP, Haram just gets brawled every time. Just every time I play him, he's brawled immediately. So I started to ask myself, like, okay, well, are there any other lines I could take here? What if I prioritize playing Tala on
Mhm.
3 instead of Haram? Well, I started prioritizing that, and my win rate started to go up in those matchups, because now I'm playing a higher strength character, so I'm not losing as much Lord of Flynn potentially. Um, my character is not getting brawled. I'm not immediately losing board presence and only drawing 2 cards for it. Um, and so that's where it's like those things of like questioning some of those typical lines that you always play,
Mhm.
and starting to think it through. Like for a long time playing aggro decks, I just would play on curve. Well, then somebody was like, well, the best line playing an aggro deck is 2 1-drops on 2. And I was like, I didn't know that, right? Um, so, some of those things of like thinking a little bit outside the box and trying a different line can help you figure out how to play your deck in a different way in a specific matchup, for example, right?
Mhm.
It, against Amber Steel, I'm quite happy to play Hiram on 4, right? Because it means they have to Zeus me and use another song to kill Hiram. um, that's not happening on turn 4.
Yeah, no.
um, you know, they're like, unless against Green Steel, unless they've shifted Beast, uh, they're not singing Bruno on 4 to get rid of Hiram. So I've got a little bit more game into those matchups with that line,
Mhm.
and then in other matchups, it's much better to play the tall line, for example. Um, yeah, I those are some of the things that I think about, when I'm starting to really evaluate a deck. That's what I'm doing. I think right now where I'm at is I'm gonna play green purple, and so starting to really ask myself some of those questions. Um, I only have 4 Ursula 2s, so, uh, luckily I have ways to bounce them. That makes me less bad into Amber Steel, but,
Mhm.
um, still, they can just go so wide so fast, and I don't have a board wipe, and so, it gets really tricky. Um, have not figured it out.
No, yeah, that's a good yeah, no, that's, that's always a concern, right? "Huh, they've gone very, very wide, and it's only, like, turn 4, what do I do?"
Yeah. I think that's how, green, purple, blurple, like those kinds of decks that don't really have ways to take out multiple characters at a time. That's how they lose, unless you're able to do like crab shenanigans.
Mhm.
That's kind of your biggest comeback mechanism, is crab. Well, I think we've talked about a good set of things. Let's wrap up with I was kind of reflecting. New Year's is next week,
Oh, yeah.
and we're through an entire year of Lorcana, like our first full year of Lorcana. And so I thought it would be fun to end the episode with talking about some best of 2024 and get your take on it. Um, so, what do you think was the best set of 2024? We've got Inklands, Ursula's Return, uh, Shimmering Skies, and Azurite Sea.
Hmm. I would say I think the best set out of 2024 would be, uh, England's Into the Inklands, not just because it's where we got Diablo and it made a bunch of decks suddenly more playable because now Emerald became, like a playable color. Uh,
Diablo was Ursula's Return.
was it? Man,
Yeah.
tells you exactly where my brain's at. But we did get a bunch of cards, right? We got a whole new mechanic. We got locations in Into the Inklands, which
Mhm.
opened up a bunch of other strategies. Right? We saw people take off and start playing those and start having massive success. It's also where we first started seeing, uh, I guess, Green Steel as a more consistent deck,
Mhm.
but it's also where we started seeing Emerald as a more consistent color.
Yeah.
So in set one and set two, it was very much a like Ruby Amethyst, like Amber Steel as the top decks, and even then you'd had Sapphire Steel players, and then you had every kind of other flavor, but nobody was really playing Emerald because they were like, it's kind of a color, but nobody's gonna play it because it's not that good. You don't have a lot of really good answers. It's not like you don't have good characters. And set three dropped, and now all of a sudden, oh look, Emerald. Like it started with Emerald Steel, but now it's a viable color. Now you can play Emerald Steel, Emerald Amethyst. Now you can actually start playing it as a color, right? Honestly, one of the things I'm really hoping happens is uh, this is going to sound weird because both of these colors get played in other decks, but I would love to see Ruby Steel actually take off as a color
Mm.
pairing because it's one of the last ones we have where there's pieces for something, but it's not quite its own competitive
Yeah.
archetype quite yet.
I think there's a few of those ink combos that are just not quite there, right?
Mhm.
Ruby Steel is one. Sapphire, uh, at Blurple, like
Yep.
Sapphire Amethyst. Sapphire Emerald has kind of started to get there, but it's still pretty shaky. Um, Amber Sapphire.
Yeah.
Um, I think amber is a color that I wish we would see some more love for. I think, when I think of the most impactful amber cards, I think about Rapunzel, and that was set one,
Yeah.
and like nothing else really holds a candle. Like if I'm like saying what the top amber cards are, it's Rapunzel. Like hands down, it's the
Yeah.
best amber card.
Yeah. I mean, hilariously, in second place, the Cinderella Ballroom Sensation, which came out in
Yeah,
set two.
yeah, yeah. And we haven't really gotten. I mean, there are cards that are played like Ursula Vanessa and other cards, but like not really deck defining cards.
Mm-hmm.
Ursula Vanessa gets played in some Steel Song builds. Like,
Yeah.
there's been nothing really in Amber that's like, yep, that's a 4 of immediately. Like we kind of thought that with Naveen, but like it really hasn't stuck around. Um, so yeah, I I agree. For me, Into the Inklands was the best set of 2024. I think the meta was really diverse too, and like it was a really good meta. I think for the most part, um, it it kind of shifted a bit throughout it, but it was a really solid meta. And yeah, it put green on the map. We got Ursula 2, we got Ursula 3,
Three.
um, and those made decks viable that weren't. And I don't know, they were just really fun. I played a lot of Emerald Amethyst, and I think that's when I kind of like really fell in love with the game. And so yeah, Into the Inklands is my award for best set of 2024. What about your best cards of 2024? So this would be cards that were released in
In
any of those
2024.
four sets. Yeah.
Got it. Best cards in 2024. Hmm. That's a tough one. Like the obvious answer here is Diablo because as much as I want to defend it, it is in fact a meta warping card. People want to play around it or want to play against it because of what it can do and how easy it is to play. I'm not going to argue that it's not, but I think honestly a card that uh, is another one of those cards that's actually really good. And I don't know that people are quite aware of how good it is Flynn Frenemy.
Mm,
Hilariously enough, because it's a 2 drop. It doesn't do anything, but it also doesn't have to put itself in harm's way to get you value,
hmm
right? Because you can. We were talking about a line earlier, right? Moana, the 1 drop Moana, the 3/2 on one, Flynn on two. Most of the time, folks aren't going to play a 3 power 2 drop. So then you'll automatically get your 3 lower on three. You can then back it up with something else if you want to. And it enables a bunch of burn strategies, which is really cool. It was not a strategy I had, thought about in this game until we saw that, and I was like, oh, cool, like a passive lore gaining effect. That's pretty neat. So yeah, honestly, my two best cards of 2024, if I can pick two, are going to be Flynn and Diablo. Uh, as maybe weird as that looks, but what about you? What do you think? What are your two? What are your picks?
Yeah, I mean, I agree. Like Diablo, um, Diablo is so powerful it got another card eroded.
Yeah.
uh, so I that's what puts it in that position for me. I think Diablo is probably the best card um, uh, to come out this year. When I think of other just like really good cards, a lot of them are set two, right? Like Fox, Rabbit, some of those. So Diablo for me is one of the top ones. Um, I think it yet to be determined how long lasting this card will be, but um, I am very impressed by Genie. Wish Fulfilled. I think
Mhm,
that card is also a format defining card, a
mhm,
format warping card. People will either want to play it or they have to figure out how to beat it.
mhm.
Because otherwise it's just going to come down. It's going to draw a card. It's evasive. It quests for two. It has 4 willpower. It's just gross. Like it is such a powerful card. I know it's only been out for like a month at this point, but like to me, that's one of the best cards of the year.
Yeah.
Uh, what was your what was the best tournament of 2024?
Hmm. So, like, in general or, like, my best experience at a tournament?
Um, I don't know either.
Sure, okay. So in general, I think, One of the coolest tournaments would have been. Oh, hmm. I'd say. Oh, what? When was? Oh, because I know the DLCs were this year.
Hmm.
Uh, I'm trying to remember. Uh, I think the most interesting one on that scale would have been, oh, I can't remember what DLC it was, but is the one where Amethyst Amber Mufasa
It was the first
one.
one. It was
Yeah,
Atlanta.
yeah, at Atlanta. Uh, that I think was the coolest tournament for me this year because that nobody saw that deck coming, and that was just that's a really great example of a meta read of like, hey, hang on, this is all these decks that are being played. I have a brew that's really good for this. I'm gonna go play it, and nobody knows how to do anything against it, and I'm just gonna walk through people. Yeah, that was amazing. That's really cool.
I think for me it was Las Vegas DLC. And I think for one, I did fairly well. I felt really proud of that. Just for me personally, top 18%, like 300 ish, 330, just felt really good to do that well. But I think it was the first one where I felt like they, at least from what I saw of the coverage, it really was more of an event and
Mhm,
not just one big tournament. There was, game designers there, and Ryan and Steve, and there was artists there to sign cards, and then there was first chapter sealed, and
mhm.
Elsas were getting pulled, and like, um, I don't know, that just was really great. It felt like a really great celebration of the game. Um, and that's what I would love to see continue at that level, at the DLC level, is just kind of this big celebration of the game. And for me, Vegas was what kind of did that. I know, they started to have competitive constructed events at some of the earlier ones, like at Dallas and Toronto. But uh being able to like see artists there, being able to like see people play pack rush with the developers, and do that kind of stuff. It was also the first one that they had like the video wall of the feature tables. And so for me, Vegas just really like elevated the experience a ton, as somebody who went there to play, but didn't make day two. um, I had a ton of fun. There was so much to do, there was so much to engage in, and for me, that's what kind of made it one of the best experiences of 2024 for me.
No, yep, I could totally, yeah, that's one of the great things about this, right? Is that they're constantly improving the DLC experience. Who knows, right? We've got our next round of these in like 3 months now, 4 months
Probably, yeah.
now. So who knows what else they're bringing in the second year of the Disney Lorcana Challenge. Um, yeah.
Cool. And the last one, I think this is an easy pick, at least for me, but I'll be curious to hear what you say. We also got set championships, and we had three of them. We'll have one, that starts here in January for this set with Scar. But what was the best set championship promo?
Honestly, I'd have to say Rockstar Stitch. The first one,
Yeah.
because the artwork is super cool. It was one of the first set championships you could go play and win an enchanted card, which was super cool. And it was a card that was, you know, meta relevant for however whatever that's worth. But honestly, yeah, it was just super cool to kind of see everybody come together and sort of play and fight it out for the first one of those.
Yeah, I mean, Stitch is always going to be the first one, right? I didn't win one. I went and bought one, from somebody in Chicago at the Chicago DLC, and I'm super excited about it. I'm just excited just to have it. I'm going to get it graded, and kind of have that trophy, which I'm super excited about. I know people didn't love the Mirabelle one, but I will make Mirabelle work.
You heard it here first, folks. DLC champion Mirabelle. Let's go.
Yeah, let's go. Um, yeah. Cool. Well, we'll finish things off there, and thanks for tuning in. We'll see you in the next one.